All right, I think we're live. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Aisha, and today we are in the third session of BBO's Dua and Chill. We're super excited for you all to join us, and happy first or last 10 days of Ramadan. I'm going to hand it over to Sister Makkah Ali, who will be leading us in Quran recitation.
Thank you so much. So today I want to recite the English translation of Surah Al-Mulk. That's the 67th chapter of the Qur'an. The translation is the sovereignty, sometimes the control. And we'll be reading a translation by M.A.S. Abdul Halim. A little bit of background. This surah is said to be a shield from the punishment of the grave. There's hadith that says the surah will intercede on behalf of the one who recites it until he is forgiven. It will argue on behalf of its companion until it causes him to enter the gardens of paradise. The Prophet ﷺ was known to have said, I would love it for this surah to be in the heart of every person among my community. And it is also said that the one who recites this surah will be spared from trials in both this life and the next. So just wanted to give a little bit of background. This begins with a testing of God's omnipotence, followed by an assertion of the inability of jinn to penetrate the heavens. It talks about the dreadful end to those who deny God's message, and it contrasts that with those who fears God. And then there's a series of rhetorical questions and statements that the surah is concluded with, what the Prophet is told to pose to those who question him regarding the end of time. So with that, I'll begin. Bismillah. Exalted is he who holds all control in his hands, who has power over all things, who created life and death to test you and reveal which of you does best. He is mighty, the forgiven. Who created the seven heavens, one above the other. You will not see any disparity in what the Lord of mercy creates. Look again. Can you see any flaws? Look again and again. Your sight will turn back to you, weak and defeated. We have adorned the lowest heaven with the lamps and made them missiles for stoning devils, for whom we have also prepared the torment of a blazing fire. For those who defy their Lord, we have prepared the torment of hell, an evil destination. They will hear it drawing in its breath when they are thrown in it. It blazes forth. Almost bursting with rage, its keepers will ask every group that is thrown in, did no one come to warn you? They will reply, yes, a warner did come to us, but we did not believe him. We said, God has revealed nothing. You are greatly misguided. They will say, if only we had listened or reasoned, we would not be with the inhabitants of the blazing fire. And they will confess their sins, always with the inhabitants of the blazing fire. But for those who fear their Lord in private, there is forgiveness and a great reward. Whether you keep your words secret or state them openly, he knows the content of every heart. How could he who created not know his own creation when he is the most subtle, the all-aware? It is he who has made the earth manageable for you. Travel its regions, eat its provisions, and to him you will be resurrected. Are you sure that he who is in heaven will not make the earth swallow you up with a violent shudder? Are you sure that he who is in heaven will not send a whirlwind to pelt you with stones? You will come to know what my warning means. Those who went before them also disbelieved. How terrible was my condemnation. Do they not see the birds above them spreading and closing their wings? It is only the Lord of mercy who holds them up. He watches over everything. Who is this force of yours who will help you, if not the Lord of mercy? The disbelievers are truly deluded. Who can provide for you if he withholds his provision? Yet they persist with their insolence and their avoidance of the truth. Who is better guided, someone who falls on his face or someone who walks steadily on a straight path? Say, prophet, it is he who brought you into being, he who endowed you with hearing, sight, and understanding. What small thanks you give. Say, it is he who scattered you throughout the earth, he to whom you will be gathered. They say, when will this promise be fulfilled if what you say is true? Say, God alone has knowledge of this. My only duty is to give clear warning. When they see it close at hands, the disbelievers' faces will be gloomy, and it will be said, "This is what you are calling for." Say, "Just think, regardless of whether God destroys me and my followers or has mercy on us, who will protect the disbelievers from an agonizing torment?" Say, "He is the Lord of mercy. We believe in him. We put our trust in him. You will come to know in time who is in obvious error." Say, "Just think, if all your water were to sink deep into the earth, who could give you flowing water in its place?" Sadaqallah al-Azim. Surely Allah speaks the truth.
MashaAllah. Thank you, Makkah, for a beautiful recitation. Did you want to share any reflections on kind of why you chose that excerpt from the Quran?
Sure. I spoke a little bit about it at the beginning, but I've been thinking about, what are some of these surahs, what are some of these chapters that we're told to turn to, that we're told to reflect upon. And this is one where there's so much evidence over if you repeat this every night, if you become a friend of the surah, that it'll actually intercede on your behalf and make sure that you enter heaven. And so I appreciate this surah because it is calling upon people to reflect. It is calling on people to reflect on the signs in nature. It is calling upon people to reflect on what it means to truly be a believer, to have faith in what God is telling you, and also to sort of exist in a state of uncertainty and ambiguity, which I think, at least for the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic, existing in a state of uncertainty and letting go of control and trusting that Allah knows when the time will come and we don't, and we have to trust in that. So I think this has been really comforting for me as I've read it, and so I wanted to offer that up to other folks as well, in case it can be of comfort to you.
SubhanAllah. Thank you. And yes, definitely check out Makkah's Substack. The link is in the banner below, and follow her on IG and Twitter as well. And so today we wanted to take an opportunity to talk about the zine that has been like 2 years in the making, but we released on the first day of Ramadan. And it really just talks about the experiences of incarcerated Muslim women. And so today I'll be joined by Makkah and then also the illustrator for the zine, Dries, to kind of talk about this whole process and then also just themes of like gender and incarceration and isolation. And so just a little sneak peek. This is what the zine looks like. We just got the physical copies thanks to Irrelevant Press out in Oakland. And so we're super excited for everyone that has ordered the zine. And if you are interested in ordering a physical copy for free for yourself or to send to an incarcerated person, you can do so at the link on the banner below. And yeah, so just a little bit of background about the zine and kind of how it came about. Back in Ramadan of 2020, the zine came about in an effort to get some hygiene products to incarcerated Muslim sisters. And so we realized that we had to go through a lot of red tape, and it was just a lot of like, I guess like just whole like hoops that we had to jump through. And so we wanted to see what other ways that we could also support our incarcerated Muslim sisters. And one way we did that was to collect their stories, about incarceration, about being Muslim while incarcerated, and then also just navigating the pandemic, because this was at the beginning of the pandemic. And so what we decided to do with these stories was to put together a zine. And so everything in the zine is based on what the sisters told us. So it's really just created by them. And this is an opportunity to get their stories out. And so we put a call for illustrators, and Dries, who joined us today, was interested and he shared his artwork with us. And we were super excited to be able to work with him because his artwork is it's so beautiful. And if you've seen the snippets of the zine on Instagram or Twitter, I think you can all agree that, he has created some beautiful work. And so throughout these 2 years, we kind of went back and forth with the BBO team, with Dries, and then with the incarcerated sisters to get their feedback on the zine, what was included, and kind of just how it looked. And I also want to give a shout out to the zine team who was not able to join us today. So Hira, Shamim, Zainab, and Isra, who all just put in so much hard work in creating the zine. And so first, I kind of just wanted to talk about experiences with collecting these stories and just the conversations that we had with the incarcerated sisters. And so Dries did a wonderful job of highlighting the major themes that were discussed within all the responses that we received, right? So there was like anger, hunger, there was loneliness, right? Incarceration can be very isolating for people that are incarcerated, but also for the families, right? And I think COVID-19 kind of just heightened that isolation because, especially during Ramadan, where you really want to spend time with your community, incarcerated Muslims were not able to do so. And then also just faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and just how that kind of gotten them through this experience with the carceral state. And so, Dries, I kind of wanted to ask you what made you interested in this project and also kind of your experience in these 2 years and a lot of Zoom calls and emails back and forth.
At the beginning, I remember Huda from Yes, I'm Hot in This posted something in her stories, and I just saw that, and I was like, okay, why not? I'm Muslim. I can relate, and I understand the importance of doing such a thing because Allah command us to do what's right, and I believe that's what's right. And so I just sent an email like, okay, maybe I suppose there are a lot of illustrators, but anyway, that was motivated me in the first time, and yeah, sorry, I got lost in my own thoughts, and it was quite an experience. I mean, I was prepared to read very emotional stuff, but it kind of hit like when I read the lady's experience for the first time. I remember I was like, wow, so many different, very complex feelings, all in the same place, and they feel hopeful and angry and sad and all at the same time. And because I didn't know who said what, it kind of felt like it was the same person talking to me when it was, I don't remember, 5 6 different ladies. So yeah, I was very very hit by all those feelings. It really marked me. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Dries. So what we did was we kind of sent the final version of the zine to the sisters to kind of just get their okay with what, the final product would be. And in an effort to kind of get them involved in this one chill, since they obviously physically couldn't be here, we asked for some statements, some reflections that they wanted to share with us. And I just wanted to read one statement from a sister who agreed to have her name shared. Her name is Erica Ray. She is an incarcerated Muslim woman in Illinois, and she shared a lot of information for the zine, was very involved in that process. And so this is her statement. Helping to create the zine/being able to contribute to the zine has been an inspiration. In the past, it has not been the practice of many Muslim organizations to lift up the voices of incarcerated Muslims, but the inclusion of our voices by the brothers and sisters of Believers Bail Out has been such a jewel. Prior to the incident for which I am incarcerated, I was not Muslim. Allah placed Muslims in my path prior to my detainment, and their love of Islam and fear of Allah still inspires me today. These Muslims introduced me to the Muslim community at Masjid al-Fatir prior to my incarceration, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. However, my incarceration ended that experience and maybe relationships/friendships that would have been lifelong. When I receive emails support from Believers Bail Out, I am reminded of the love poured into me as a new Muslim. I don't know if I can say that Islam should always feel like a new love, but what I do know is Islam feels like a new love when there is a community of support. Your work, tenacity, and dedication are much needed and appreciated. Islam is freedom, and Believers Bail Out are its agents. Love and solidarity. Salam. And so Erica has been very, like I said, very involved in the zine process. And I'm so glad that she was able to send in a statement for this dua and chill. For folks who may not be familiar with Erica, like I said, she's incarcerated in Illinois, and she has been fighting an appeal process to get her resentenced. And so, just a little bit of background. In Illinois, it is legal for a person to be arrested, charged, and convicted of a crime they not only did not commit, but also did not plan, agree, or intend to commit, and at which they were not even present. And so these are laws of accountability that are very prevalent in Illinois, and one that caused Erica to be incarcerated. And so Erica's case just a few months ago, back in December, was dismissed by a judge, her petition, which was seeking resentencing. And the judge decided to maintain Erica's accountability, conviction, and 42-year sentence. She's currently in the appeal process for her case, and is asking for support. And so for folks who may not be familiar with these organizations, specifically Moms United Against Violence and Incarceration, which play a very vital role in supporting incarcerated women in Illinois. They have kind of been fundamental in promoting and supporting Erica in her case for resentencing and in this appeals process. And so I definitely recommend folks check out the work of Moms United and follow them on social media just to keep up and find more ways that they can support Erica through this process, but also support other incarcerated women. And yeah, so I kind of just wanted to, after talking about the zine specifically, to talk about in general kind of gender and incarceration, and kind of the ways that women are targeted by the carceral state. So before I say anything, Maka, did you want to kind of add anything about the zine, just about anything that we talked about so far?
Sure. I'm just really grateful that you all are doing this project. I've been thinking a lot this Ramadan about how Islam really was revealed as a religion to people on the margins, right? Like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an orphan. He was illiterate. He, was not necessarily someone who was esteemed at the time of revelation and when he was selected by Allah to be in this position. And so I think about that message often of what does it mean to sort of be pushed to the brinks of society and to make sure and to know that Allah has you and to know that a community will have you. And so I'm really grateful for this project because as Sister Erica, is that her name, mentioned in her reflections, a lot of times incarcerated Muslims are not included in programming in the larger Muslim community. And in conversations about incarcerated Muslims, incarcerated women often are left out of the conversation. And I think the more folks learn about the system, the more infuriating you probably will feel when you realize that so many people who are perpetuators of violence, for example, are victims of violence, and that we are insistent upon this system that disappears people and inflicts even more and more violence upon them rather than allowing space for healing, rather than allowing a space for growth. So I think it is incredible that you all have given the opportunity for people that are stuck in this system, for people that society is trying to disappear, to make them visible, to make their stories visible, to allow them space to process, to reflect, to say what's on their minds, what's on their heart, and to remind them that they have a stance in this community, that people really care about them and are thinking about them and are praying for them. So just really grateful for the opportunity, especially in the month of Ramadan, to reflect on who is missing from the spaces that we're in and why. Who is keeping them out? What do they want us to know about them and about their stories? And so to be in a position to actually learn and listen and sit and understand folks that maybe you don't interact with on a day-to-day basis, I just think it's a really true honor, and I'm glad that Believers Bailout is doing this.
Thank you, Maka. And yes, to everything that you said, retweet. But I also think specifically for the Muslim communities in the United States, right? We don't really um, talk about or think about our incarcerated population, right? Like you said, they're kind of just pushed to the side and forgotten by society, which is kind of the point of prisons, right? And so I think it's so important for us to hear these stories and have these conversations, right? And kind of one of the themes that was very prevalent within the zine was the idea of like incarceration as family separation, right? um, when you incarcerate someone, you're not just incarcerating that single person, you're incarcerating a family. You're incarcerating a community, right? That you were removing that person, the value that they bring to their families, the value that they bring to their communities, and you're just removing that from society. And so, in kind of preparing for this conversation, I was doing a lot of research on kind of gender incarceration, the experiences of incarcerated women, and there were just some statistics that I wanted to share with folks. And these are statistics that kind of we kept in the back of our minds when we were creating this scene. But so the United States incarcerates the most women out of every other country in the world. So we're the largest incarcerator of women. There are over 200,000 women and girls incarcerated in the United States currently. About 80 to 90% of women in prison have been victims of sexual or physical violence. The number is even higher for incarcerated women in Illinois. And because of these experiences, many women suffer from PTSD. 1.3 million children are affected by female imprisonment. And this number includes children at home when the mother is imprisoned and the babies are born and raised in prison. And so we think about this violence that women experience before they're incarcerated, right? But also just this idea of prisons kind of extending and continuing these cycles of violence, right? Because the violence doesn't just stop when someone is incarcerated. It just, someone else is kind of conducting that violence. And so another statistic that I wanted to share is that over 200,000 prisoners are sexually abused annually, and the majority by staff. And this rate is even higher for transgender, incarcerated people that are transgender. And 70% of people in women's prisons are mothers, right? So this kind of just goes back to the idea of incarceration as family separation. And so while also kind of looking at different ideas to talk about and different reflections, I listened to this podcast. It's called Movement Memos by Kelly Hayes, who's an abolitionist writer and organizer. And she actually, this podcast was with an organizer of Moms United. And so this organizer, her name is Monica Cosby. She's formerly incarcerated, and she's an organizer in Chicago with Moms United. And she kind of talks about the different communities of care that incarcerated people create in prison, right? And the different organizing that happens in prison, because it doesn't just happen on the outside. There's very important organizing that happens, and different, just levels of care that is provided by incarcerated people to each other. And so something that I found very surprising in Monica's talk and in her responses was that women in prison are punished at higher rates than men, and a lot of times for smaller infractions. So NPR did a study and found this across, I think, 15 different states, that women are punished at higher rates than men. And a lot of times these infractions are just for insolence. In Illinois prisons, women are frequently ticketed for insolence and can wind up in solitary confinement over just their verbal tone, or for making a goofy facial expression, or just saying something to someone that works at the prison that they just didn't like their tone, or they didn't like the way that they said it. And so Monica kind of talks a lot about how, already prisons and jails are isolating, right? And then when people are put into solitary confinement for, days, weeks, however long, that's just continuing. It's heightened isolation, right? And researchers and studies have found that solitary confinement can be as clinically distressing as physical torture. And so, anyone that may be experiencing symptoms of mental illness or have any issues with their mental health, these symptoms and these issues are just heightened once they come out of solitary confinement, right? And so, something that Monica said was that if people are taken away over, or that people who are taken away over mental health episodes in prison don't always come back, and if they do, they may not come back the same. And so I just want to like sit with that for a little bit, because this kind of just goes back to this idea of isolation, and how violent just incarceration can be. Yeah, and so Maka, Greece, if you have any reflections you want to share, or just anything you want to add on to that.
Well, I'm not American, so I don't have the same experience as you have. But I think we might share a lot of similarities between both our countries. And what you're describing is kind of a Western universal experience for us living in Western countries. I remember some data about, at least in my country, 2/3 of the incarcerated people are there for very short sentences. So that means you're just marginalizing people for like 2 years, and then they come out of prison and they're even more marginalized. And so it's kind of a cycle. I mean, it is a cycle, a never-ending cycle. And from my perspective, what's even more infuriating about your system, guys, is the whole capitalism thing. The way prison are really a market, something you gain money from. All those lives are completely destroyed just for the benefits of a few ones. And from my perspective, it's the most I just feel a lot of anger, and I'm not even living in America. And yeah, I'm sorry, my thoughts are kind of all over the place. But yeah.
Not all over the place at all. That really resonates with me. And I think the anger is something that I feel as well, very viscerally. I think hearing some of those statistics, one of the things that I was thinking about is just the disproportionate number of people of color, in particular Black men and women, that are in the system in the United States. And some of the things that you were sharing about how the systems of violence work within the system of just for a facial expression, et cetera, being harshly punished through inhumane treatment like solitary confinement. I started thinking about the school to prison pipeline. I started thinking about workplaces. I started thinking about, as a Black woman myself, how I am marginalized, and how people who look like me or who are darker than me, our bodies are policed and threatened, and any sort of indication of our autonomy, any expression of our own power, of our own opinions, of our own dissent from what is deemed, appropriate, it results in really extreme measures, even as young as preschool and kindergarten. The data is out there. There are reports and reports that have been released about how little girls are removed from classrooms, little Black girls are removed from classrooms for minor infractions at a higher rate than their peers. And when they are removed from the classroom, when they're suspended or when they're put in detention or these things, then there's a higher likelihood that they will enter into the incarceration system, whether as juveniles or as adults. And how it truly is, when people talk about the school to prison pipeline, this isn't just an expression. It's how these rules, the way that we treat and that we dehumanize Black people and Black women in the terms of what we're talking about today, how it really has lifelong implications, and how it's the same system when we talk about systemic violence or systemic racism from the time when you're 3 or 4 years old, how you're treated out in the world, and how you're being pushed into the margins so that you can feed into this system, which is inherently designed just to dehumanize and maximize profit. And then, then you're churned out until the next person comes in. So I was thinking about that a lot as you were speaking, just around the way in which sometimes I have seen, especially in Muslim spaces, there's this idea that, oh, that could never be me, right? Like that, this is terrible that this happened to someone, but maybe my family isn't impoverished. Maybe I'm not from that cultural background. Maybe I'm not from this country. So I am not susceptible to the same rules. I'm not susceptible to the same challenges. I work hard, I'll stay out of trouble, etc. And I hope that people don't actually see this as something that could never happen to them, because if there's one thing that I know for sure, it's that the legal system in the United States is malleable. It adjusts to whatever folks want to criminalize at any given moment. And things are decriminalized depending on who's in power, and other things are criminalized. And so there are things that we're doing every day that you may or may not feel like you're getting away with, but depending on where you are, you could end up on the other side of the system. And so I think it's important to really reflect upon what it means to truly be in kinship with our incarcerated brothers and sisters, and to recognize that we are not different than them. We currently have different circumstances than they do. And inshallah, we don't have to face those circumstances, but recognizing that we are all sitting at different parts of the system, and we are all susceptible at any moment to the lines shifting suddenly and the lines changing. One of my friends who is a defense attorney, she's a public defender, she once said that, the role of the police is not to solve crime, it's to distribute it. And I think about that often, that, you might run a stop sign or a red light or forget your license at home, or do all of these things that we know there are technical laws against. You might speed, for example. That's something that a lot of people who drive do every single day. So it's not a matter of solving a crime. It's a matter of, will that crime be distributed and attributed to you by someone on duty? So I just want to offer that as a point of reflection for folks, that when we're talking about people who are incarcerated, when we're talking about their stories and their voices, yes, a lot of times they're a product of their circumstances, but we are also a product of our circumstances, and those circumstances can shift at any moment. So I just hope that folks are really thinking about that, and really recognizing that, not caring about this issue today, it may not be relevant to you today, but we're all a part of the same community, and we're all susceptible to these same laws. So just want to offer that up.
Absolutely. I think prison is more a tool to marginalize certain community, but not really. It was sold as an answer, a fair punishment, but it's really not. It's more a way for domination and power, and also money, but it's certainly not fair, and I really don't think it's an answer. This whole war on drug, which is more an excuse, in fact, in the US and also in France, to criminalize Black communities and other racialized communities. It's just, okay, you have this one guy who sells drugs, and he probably sells drugs because, okay, so you criminalize drugs, and he's selling that for a living, for a reason, because you don't want to mess with law. I mean, nobody do that just as a hobby. And so you put that guy in prison, and what's next? He just get out, and it's even worse. So he probably will go back to prison, or maybe worse. It's not an answer. It's just an excuse to marginalize people and gain money at the same time. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. I don't have any conclusion, really, just that.
Thank you, Maka and Dries, for those reflections. Just going off of something that Maka said and kind of what it means to be in kinship with our incarcerated brothers and sisters, right? I think it was Sadia Bashir last week on the Dua and Chill who said that you are not a believer until you want for yourself what you want for your neighbor, right? And so, yes, we may not be in those circumstances, but for those of us that have access to, our basic needs, right? That have access to things like education and a roof above our heads and um, employment, healthcare, things like that, right? Just like those basic fundamental needs that everyone should want. That's what we should want for everyone, right? And just thinking about how a lot of the populations that are incarcerated, right, don't have access to such basic needs, right? When we look at specifically in Chicago, right? There are a lack of like educational resources, of hospitals, things like that in areas of the city. And those are the areas of the city that are most policed, right? The areas of the city that don't get as many resources as, say, like the white areas on the north side and in downtown. And so just thinking about kind of when we are advocating for ourselves, we should be advocating for our incarcerated kin as well, right? And so just to end on a few notes, we have the link to order the zine below. um, it's completely free, but if you would like to donate anything to the sisters that created the zine, the incarcerated sisters, you can do so on our launch good. We have two sections that you can click on and specify for those funds to go directly to the incarcerated sisters. And so we would love for you all to order the zine, right? It's completely free. We're going to also release a digital version closer to the end of Ramadan. So you'll have access to the full zine. But these, like, just look at how pretty these physical copies are. Like, you want these. And also, if you're able to, right, please donate to the women. These funds will go directly on their books. And so a lot of incarcerated women specifically don't have as much access to hygiene products and just products that they need, to go about their day-to-day lives. And so, with these funds, they can buy hygiene products, anything that they need. It costs money to talk to people, right, outside of prison. And so, if they need to make any phone calls, send any emails, just to send an email to someone outside, you need to pay money. So, like, everything is just monetized in prison. Um, and so this is a great way for us to support them and just to get these funds back to them, because of all the work that they put into sharing these stories and to helping us put this out for you all. Um, Yes. And so we want to emphasize, so our theme this Ramadan is kind of planting seeds where we stand. It's a continuation of our previous themes of reimagining community, kind of walking it like we talk it, and now just really planting the seeds where we stand. And yeah, does anyone want to close this off with a dua, Makkah, perhaps?
Sure, and I won't offer a formal dua, but I will just offer perhaps some reflections and things for us to think about. Um, I would love for us to think about, what does it mean to stand in solidarity with people? What does it mean to make visible the invisible? What does it mean to listen to voices that have been silenced? What does it mean to give from that which we have been given? I hope that we can all use the wealth that we have been given, whether that wealth is health, whether it's technology, whether it's monetarily. And we know in our tradition, the more you give, the wealthier you are, that you will be rewarded over and over and over again from that which you give, and that which you keep, that which you hoard, you're going to be held accountable for. And so one thing that I'm thinking about in terms of planting our seeds, in terms of being in kinship, in terms of building community, is what are we holding on to that perhaps would be better if we released, that perhaps would actually benefit more people and would benefit us even more greatly if we released it and if we shared it with others than if we held on to it ourselves. I think about that in terms of money. I think about that in terms of knowledge. I think about that in terms of spirit and companionship. So I pray that, this Ramadan and beyond, that we are inspired to really listen to the stories of those that we have ignored, and that had excluded from our narratives, from our communities, from our masajid, even from our digital and online spaces that we're not as familiar with. I pray that we're all inspired to listen, to learn, to stand behind these folks and alongside them, to really figure out what are the things that we can do today to help them where they're at. Sometimes we look at the system and we feel like hopeless, like there's nothing that we can do. I hope this zine, I hope this conversation today, I hope Believers Bail Out, the entire project and organization, really inspires folks to recognize there are small steps that you can take that will completely transform the lives of others in our community. So I pray that we are up for that task of transformation, self-transformation, and community transformation, in service of a better world and a better future for all of us. Ameen.
Thank you, Makkah, for such a beautiful dua, and to our dua and chill. Thank you all for tuning in. We have our Launch Good fundraiser linked at the bottom. So, donate your zakat. So we're zakat eligible. Donate your sadaqah this Ramadan and these last 10 nights of Ramadan to help us bail out our incarcerated brothers and sisters.